Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I'm going to finish up my series that I started a long time ago and haven't done a follow-up on for a month, my series on American World War I fiction. And today I'm going to be talking about my favorite American World War I fiction novel, which is called Through the Wheat by Thomas Boyd. I don't know if you can read the name on there. That's my favorite American World War I fiction novel. I was inspired to get back to this series on American World War I fiction by Ghost Reader, who has started a 100th anniversary of the End of World War I series on his channel. I'll leave a link to his channel down below and his series on World War I. It's been really interesting. He's doing a really great job with those videos. And World War I is kind of one of my subjects as a historian I like the most. And Thomas Boyd and Through the Wheat is my favorite American World War I piece of fiction. Full disclaimer, about 12 years ago now, I wrote a biography of Thomas Boyd, which was published, so that probably has something to do with my pro-Thomas Boyd bias and my pro-Through the Wheat bias. So, Thomas Boyd was a World War I Marine who was a member of the 6th Marine Regiment, and he fought in the defense of Chateau Thierry. He was at the Battle below Wood. He was at the Battle of Soissons. He was at the Battle of Mont Blanc, and he was a part of the Army of Occupation. And after the war, he came back to the United States, moved to the St. Paul, Minneapolis area, got married, and became kind of through just kind of luck. He became a book reviewer at the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and through that he met a man who he became partners with at a bookstore, and through that he became a member of the St. Paul or the Minnesota literati. This allowed him to meet Sinclair Lewis and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and he and Fitzgerald became friends. Boyd helped Fitzgerald do some promotional work for The Beautiful and the Damned, and in return Fitzgerald got Boyd's wife's novel published through Scribner's and encouraged Boyd to write Through the Wheat. When Through the Wheat was published, it was hailed as kind of the most honest and direct of all the American World War I novels up to that point. The novel was published in 1923, and unlike the other American World War I novels or pieces of fiction that I've talked about, with the exception of William March Scum Decay, it was the story told directly from the perspective of an American combat soldier. After the publication of that novel, Boyd became a publishing author. He wrote a book of short stories about World War I, and then he turned his attention to subjects having to do with Ohio and history. He became a biographer. He published several more novels. He was somewhat successful as a biographer and as a writer of historical fiction, but the Great Depression kind of destroyed the market for books right about the time he had published his last major biography, a biography of Light Horse Harry Lee. He struggled to make ends meet. He struggled for money. He moved to Hollywood for a while to try to work as a screenwriter. That didn't work. He settled in Vermont. He got involved in politics, very left-wing politics, and he became a communist, and he ran as the communist candidate for governor of Vermont in 1934. He died in 1935 of health complications that were later ruled by the Veterans Administration to be the result of having been gassed during World War I. So, Through the Wheat is my favorite American World War I novel. I have several copies. This is a first edition of the 1923 novel. This is I believe a 1924-25 edition with illustrations, which is also, this is 1927, which is also a first edition. It has illustrations from Captain John W. Thompson, who is also a veteran of World War I. I have this 1978 edition from the University of Northern Illinois Press, which has a foreword by James Dickey, the author of Deliverance and An American Poet, and has my favorite picture of Thomas Boyd in the back, which I always think makes him look a little bit like Burt Lancaster. And then later, sometime around, I think this one was published in 2004, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln came out with a paperback version of the novel. So the novel, Through the Wheat, is somewhat autobiographical. Its main character, William Hicks, is definitely kind of living the same experiences that Thomas Boyd did as a World War I Marine. And we see Hicks experience many of the same things that a lot of American soldiers experienced during World War I. At first, initially frustrated with the lack of action they saw, because the American Expeditionary Force was in France for a while before they saw any action. General Pershing's idea was to gradually introduce Americans to combat, to give them experience, and attempt to keep casualties as low as possible. Hicks, Boyd, spent some time in the trenches around Verdun, getting a taste of combat experience, and then Hicks, Boyd, was rushed into combat to stop the German advance, which almost broke through in 1917 and reached Paris. Again, William Hicks and Thomas Boyd both served at the Battle of Belleau Wood, and there's some interesting descriptions of combat there at the Battle of Belleau Wood, including a description of some dead Germans in the woods during that battle, in which Boyd, I think, offers a pretty interesting description of kind of the searing nature of war, where I think he comes upon a group of 3 German soldiers, all of whom are in kind of different states of damage from their wounds that killed them, some horribly mangled, and then one who, he says in the book, could have seemed to be sleeping. This kind of first heavy combat for Hicks is really disillusioning, particularly after the Battle of Belleau Wood. Hicks witnesses a young soldier who survived the battle be killed by a limb falling from a tree while he was resting on the ground. This is also something Boyd would have known about directly. Hicks rescues soldiers under enemy artillery fire. Boyd did the same. Boyd was awarded a Croix de Guerre for a similar action. Hicks is gassed. Boyd was gassed. As a matter of fact, it's that wounding in a gas attack which contributed to Thomas Boyd, the author's, heart problems later on, and the VA ruled contributed to the cerebral hemorrhage, which killed him. The stories of Hicks and Boyd vary a little bit. At the end of the novel, Through the Wheat, Hicks is definitely suffering from battle fatigue, shell shock. He wanders forward of his position, coming really close to advancing German soldiers to retrieve his dropped machine gun, and clearly not caring what happens to him. And the line in the book that Boyd writes in the book is that at that point in his experiences, the soul of Hicks was numb, where he clearly didn't care what happened to him. This is a little bit different. This is kind of a rearranging of events in terms of Boyd's life. But Through the Wheat itself is I think, an effective novel as a historical document. Boyd he's a mannered writer, is what I would say, particularly in his first book. And his style of writing is not really something I think that appeals to modern readers very much. But Through the Wheat as a historical document, I think is really good. And as a matter of fact, this is how I was introduced to the topic. I was doing an independent study as a graduate student on historical accuracy in World War I fiction. And regardless of what Paul Fussell said, I think Fussell reviews Through the Wheat and essentially kind of trashes it as historical accuracy. From my research, I can tell you that Through the Wheat mirrors very closely the events which actually took place, and the attitudes of American soldiers, and kind of that change that takes place from gung-ho American soldiers at the beginning to more disillusioned, realistic American soldiers near the end. In addition to that, Through the Wheat, I think, is kind of, if you've read The Red Badge of Courage, Through the Wheat is kind of jarring in its kind of more obvious attempts to connect, maybe not connect, but it's clearly influenced by The Red Badge of Courage in terms of some of its style and a little bit of the naturalism that's included. But again, having said all that, I think it's a good book, and it's my favorite American World War I novel. So I hope you've enjoyed this little series I did on American World War I fiction, and I hope if you're interested, you look for some of these titles and pick them up. Again, go check out Ghost Reader's channel and his series on World War I. I think it's really good. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.